I have heard the narrative that the reason, Bernie Sanders was so accommodating and dropped out when he did is because he doesn't want to be remembered as a Ralph Nader, which I always chuckled at because, put Ralph Nader on my tombstone, I'll be a happy, I'll be a happy girl. For all that you have done, all the millions of lives that your advocacy have saved, et cetera. But also I know that there are many people in America who, if they know me, hate me because I'm probably the third most famous Jill Stein voter after Susan Sarandon and like Jill Stein herself in 2016. And the very fact that I even voted third party in New York, where there was absolutely no risk even to Hillary Clinton's chances of winning the state, is considered to make me persona non grata, which says to me a little bit something about how powerful third party actually is and what kind of a threat it is to the two-party system, and how perhaps leftists who really want to exert pressure that's not always being exerted by unions the way we'd like, pressure that's not always being exerted by progressives in Congress the way we'd like, should take more seriously the idea of taking those 45,000 votes or whatever it was that were the margin of victory for Joe Biden and saying, let's organize just enough people in discrete swing states that we can make the kinds of demands that are enormously popular, that a majority of Americans want, and use the bully pulpit to say the onus is on the Democratic Party for not making these concessions. If you do, then we will drop out and we won't pressure you in this way. If you don't, then you have to explain to the voting public why you chose to lose to whatever fascist comes down the pike instead of simply supporting the wealth tax that 2/3 of Americans support.
Well, historically, third parties contributed tremendous to democracy in our country and never won a national election. The Anti-Slavery Party in 1840, they only got 45,000 votes. They started the process. The Women's Rights Party, the Labor Farmer parties, and in the 20th century, the Congress and the states began cracking down on third parties by creating huge access barriers to getting on the ballot. No other Western country comes close to all the state tens of thousands of petitions, and they're easily disregarded and dismissed arbitrarily. It's a nightmare. We've written all about this and we've litigated it for years. This country's a two-party duopoly, which by definition is not a democratic society. They know how to marginalize, how to intimidate, how to block third parties in so many ways it would fill a textbook. And they keep up thinking up new ways. Now comes the 21st century, and third parties have very, very little impact on the two parties. And whenever they get more votes than the difference between the two-party candidates, they're immediately blasted as spoilers and saboteurs and so forth, which is really an ugly attitude. Instead of saying let the many flowers bloom, give people out there, the voters, more choices and voices, it's just the reverse. They want to restrict. By blocking third parties, they're telling the voters, we're going to make sure you don't have a chance to vote for a third party candidate. That's pretty dictatorial. And yet state laws have been upheld in this way, although we've won quite a few cases in court on
is it true?
various issues.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of your bargaining leverage, it's very rare that you'll get that kind of sophistication where a budding third-party candidate or movement would say, I won't run unless you do this. Because, first of all, they'll laugh at you because you're not on the ballot to take votes.
Well,
and
presuming that you did do that.
Ballot, if you're once on the ballot, you can't say that. You can't play that game to your loyal voters, you see? Like, Nader, you should have pulled out in 2000. After hundreds of thousands of people sweated to get us on the ballot and support us, I'm going to feed cynicism by pulling out. I'm proposing things the Democratic Party should have adopted years ago. Franklin Delano Roosevelt adopted them. I'm not keeping the party of Franklin Delano Roosevelt from sweeping the rug out under the Green Party and adopting its majoritarian-supported agenda. I gave it to them. I wrote them the letters when I was running the Democrat-Republican Party. I said, here's our agenda. Here are the polls. Take it.
Yeah.
Take it.
Yeah, I've heard, and tell me if this is wrong, I've heard that you basically presented Al Gore with a list of 20 or so asks and said, if you do 3 of these, I'll lay off. Is there truth to that? That you basically presented Al Gore in 2000 a list of 20 or so asks, proposals, policies, what have you. And we're like, if you do some fraction of these, can you tell us more about that?
We gave him our whole agenda. It was on the internet, and we gave it to him. In 2004, so frustrated were we that we got some waiter and waitress uniforms and silver platters, and in Washington, D.C., and we had 10 issues, one on a platter, and we marched down to K Street to where John Kerry had his headquarters on a silver platter, Brianna, to give him the issues. and by the way, many of them were those he supported rhetorically on Capitol Hill, like cracking down on corporate crime, like labor law reform.
And what happened when you showed up with your aprons on?
No, nothing happened. And there was a little AP story on it. I think the press pretty much ignored it. I thought it was pretty good demonstrative campaigning. But the press is bad, too, because 95% of the questions they asked me on all my presidential campaigns is, how do you feel being a spoiler? Yeah. Do you think you're going to be a spoiler?
They even
I said, look,
Bernie.
I'm not running. Yeah. I'm not running to save the Democratic Party. I represent the 60,000 workers who lose their lives in occupational disease and trauma. I'm representing 15 million kids who go to bed hungry at night. I'm representing people who can't have affordable housing. I'm representing this. That's where I'm coming from. I'm not running to save the Democratic Party. They want to adopt my program. Be my guest. I'll give it to them on a silver platter. But they're too indentured to corporate commercial interests and their own self-seeking sinecures to want to stand for the people and landslide the Republican Party.